Bottom line is gold did outperform stocks and bonds since January 1st, 2022. It's also outperformed the stock market since January 1st of the millennium. And now over 50 years, it's outperformed bonds. But you would never know that based on there's no fan clubs for gold on Wall Street. It is still treated as kryptonite.
This is Kaiser Johnson, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for August 19th through August 26th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature the famous 1-ounce gold Krugerrand at just $60 over spot. Next, we have the favorite bullion coin of Europe, backdated silver Philharmonics at just $3.10 over spot. And finally, we have 1-ounce platinum Canadian maples at only $80 over spot, one of the lowest premiums on platinum we've seen in a long time. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Peter Grandich from Peter Grandich and Company. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure, but a special pleasure now that we hit $2,500 on gold. I wouldn't kid you.
And definitely, and I know you've been predicting this for quite a while, and it seems to be holding here now as we record this on August 19th, Monday here. Your perspective on this new development?
Well, it goes back quite a bit. It almost goes back 10 years when gold was in 1300 stage. And then in the end of 2021, I became so enamored with gold that I felt it would outperform both stocks and bonds. And for myself, I sold all general equities and bonds, equities that weren't related to natural resources, and told anybody that, not many people fit that mode, but those that did, it was worth doing. A handful of our clients did. Bottom line is gold did outperform stocks and bonds since January 1st, 2022. It's also outperformed the stock market since January 1st of the millennium. And now over 50 years, it's outperformed bonds. But you would never know that based on there's no fan clubs for gold on Wall Street. It is still treated as kryptonite. And what's interesting about that, Elijah, is the central bank's banker, the Bank of International Settlements, went so far as to make gold a tier 1 investment a few years ago, joining bonds. And yet the world I see in our planning group is full of bonds when potential clients come in, and almost no one really has physical bullion yet. I know your listeners do, and thank God they did, because they should be real happy that they listened to you. But by and large, it's still not something that is even remotely close to fully owned, let alone overly owned. So it still has a ways to go, in my view.
And you've mentioned before that it was going to be an arm wrestling match up to 2,500. It seems like that's what we saw, quite a few pullbacks in the interim there. But now that we have broken this $2,500 level, where do you see gold heading from here?
So the only change, I would say, and with due respect to your work, and I happen to like personally because of our shared faith, it's not as cheap as it once was. I think anybody that says that would be erroneous. What I think is important to understand is what's caused it to get where it's gotten to. And are those points still as valid today as they were before? And the answer is yes. But to double from here, and let's just say you somehow saw the future and said to me, Pete, I went in this time machine and I went 3 years ahead, it's $5,000. I would say to you, Elijah, as bad as we think things are now, they must have got 10 times worse. And here's the bad news, or good news if you own gold. Who's to say that can't happen, given everything that's happening economically, socially, and politically? How could anyone stand here in the complacency that's just so abundant among the general financial service community and the general investment community? Given all the things that are happening, it is a legitimate possibility. And that's why I would still say that it still has substantial upside over time for those that are interested for capital appreciation. But as you know, I've stated for virtually my entire 40-year career, You buy gold in your portfolio and hope it doesn't go up. And I always tell you, the people that are sitting down the first time, they look at you and go, Mr. Grandich, why do you want me to buy something that you don't think is going to go up? And I'd always say basically the same thing, because if it does, what I see here in your portfolio is likely to go down, and you need insurance. And I always ask, you have car insurance? They say yes. So you have home insurance? Well, you need portfolio insurance. So minimally, especially people that still find themselves very ownership of financial assets, should own gold and hope it doesn't go up. Hope I don't have to call Elijah to sell my gold for profit, because if I am, chances are my general financial assets didn't do as well.
It is interesting how recently we actually have seen the stock market do quite well ever since, in the last couple of weeks, we did see that major pullback panic due to what was happening with the yen and also unemployment and jobs numbers in the US. But the stock market has recovered very well since that panic. But you anticipate that changing soon, I assume. What is your outlook for the stock market going forward?
Yeah, Elijah, I personally don't believe it was a panic. I believe, yes, there was a big hiccup in Japan, and yes, it gave some people reasons to take some profits off the table. The market had gone up in a fairly narrow way. It was a handful of major companies that were driving the overall market higher. The issue is that we have an entire generation of investors and professional advisors who grew up basically learning how to drive on a one-way street. In the last 25 years, realistically, there's been a couple big hiccups, and the rest has been a bullish environment, especially in bonds until the last couple of years. And therefore, people grown accustomed to that. Well, if the Federal Reserve just cuts interest rates, which they've always done in the past, the market always responds well. That's the put. They call it the Fed put. And there's no reason that a person can't say that it can't happen again. I think there is, but their mentality would not allow them to. And that's what you've just seen in the market. You had a pullback. The mood changed on interest rates. It's clear and evident that Bidenomics is a failure. The economy is not as strong as people said. We're going to see a review of the labor statistics and see a major change to far less employment that exists than what we were told. And therefore, the belief is the Fed comes in, they cut interest rates, the stock market goes up. What do I got to worry for? And that's basically, in the simplest terms, the attitude. And the difficulty with that is, and what I would like to then ask those people, then explain to me why gold is at $2,500. Because if it all was hunky-dory and everything was fine, we'd be talking about $1,500 or $1,000 gold. So yes, the stock market did manage to rise, rebound, whatever you want to call it, while gold was going up. But understand this. In the last 3 years, it's gone up triple the amount gold has as in the stock market did. And yet most people did not share in that.
Now, as for the economic situation going forward and also what we're seeing politically here, I know last time we had you on, you said, probably the last thing we would want to hear is President Harris. And obviously, since we had you on last, the election has changed quite a bit. Kamala Harris being on the top of the ticket now, along with Minnesota Governor Walz. So you have, someone from California and someone from Minnesota, two of the most liberal places with very liberal policies. How do you think this is going to impact things economically if Harris does win? And it seems like if you look at the betting markets, Harris is favored to win right now. It's almost a toss-up. But if we do have a President Harris, what do you think that will do to the economy?
Hold on, I'm just going through a shake even thinking of that. So let me get through that shake. Listen, I had told you about a President Harris because you know that I said at the beginning of the year, I felt one, if not both of them, who were the leading candidates at the time to be at Election Day, Biden and Trump, would not be on the Election Day ballot, if you remember. And sure enough, the Biden was the easier one because his health, clearly there was something wrong with him and it got acute. I also said at the time, as bad as Biden is, I take him 100 times over Harris. I don't believe Harris is winning. I mean, that's just, I can't say it for certain. Every other indication is when you look, Trump gets overwhelming attendance. Barely people are showing up for hers. The moment she tries to speak on her own, she's just, I mean, really bad. But like you said, it is a possibility that she could win. If you want $5,000 gold, then you want President Harris. Gold will certainly get to 5,000 faster, if at all, if she took over, and many of the similar policies that have already been in place would be compounded by even a more liberal, hard left view. But at what cost would that $5,000 gold be to you? I don't think our living conditions would be anything remotely close to what we've grown accustomed to. And I think as a Catholic Christian, it's already getting a little bit of a challenge to show your faith and wear it on your sleeve. I could imagine 4 more years with wokeness being leading out of the White House, how difficult that would be. So yeah, there is a dramatic difference in both of them. That's one thing that can be said in this election, business-wise, how they plan on going. First of all, I don't believe she has a personal own economic plan. I don't believe Kamala Harris, has her own idea and thought. I don't think she's had an original idea since she's been in politics. I do believe Trump does. I believe that's the difference. Whether you agree or you like the way he says it, that's another matter. I believe he brings to the table much more needed economic business sense than her running mate can be. But I also believe the polls are a sham. I don't believe she's remotely close ahead. There's nothing to indicate it. Whenever you speak to people that normally you would expect to be on her side, people are being shocked to find out that they're actually talking about voting for Trump, and the Trump people are stronger than ever. So I'm a believer that that is not the real case. I'm not telling people to go bet online on the presidency, but man, if you ask me where my money would go on Trump or wouldn't be bet. I wouldn't put a nickel's worth on her winning the presidency.
Well, I definitely hope you're right in that regard. When we do look at past administrations, though, when it comes to the financial system, it seems like, at least if you look at the U.S. national debt, it doesn't actually matter if it's the Democrat or Republican. If you look at Biden, if you look at Trump, if you look at Obama, Bush, all of them added tremendous amounts to the U.S. debt. So it doesn't seem like, regardless of whether Harris wins or Trump wins, the long-term outlook for the U.S. is going to be any different.
No, it doesn't. My comment has been this, Elijah. If she wins, it's straight downhill. If Trump wins, it's grudgingly putting our feet, trying not to slide down the hill, but we end up going further down the hill anyway over time. That's the only difference between them both. You're absolutely right. What got us here to have 35 trillion in debt, multi-trillion-dollar deficits, has been come from both sides of the aisle, and there isn't a whimper on either side of the aisle to do anything about that. In fact, they're now growing accustomed to having $2 to $3 trillion a year deficits. Part of the reason why gold has done what it's done and why it will continue to go up as those things continue.
Now, when it comes to, I know there were 5 crises that we've gone over before, political chaos. There was a retirement crisis, the national debt crisis, immigration crisis, and maybe, forgive me, I think I might be missing one of them there. But for those 5 crises, how do you see them playing out? Any updates you have in that regard?
All have gotten worse. The debt crisis gets worse. The retirement crisis now, not only do we see 65% of Americans working paycheck to paycheck, they're never going to be able to retire. But now the bottom 50 or the bottom half of income earners, up to 40% of them now are using credit cards to pay for food, gas, electrical. And once you get behind on a credit card, it's like owing money to a loan shark. You never get even. You never get out. The aging crisis is part of that retirement crisis. The The third, of course, is the immigration crisis. Now, here too, people have grown accustomed to, but every day, more and more people are coming into the country illegally. More and more of them are using government services, and more federal, state, and local monies being spent on that. New York City is kicking up, having to spend $5 billion with a B to go and fix all these things. It's just, it is just an unthought of factor of how much economically things are costing us for all these things. And then the political paralysis, because you would hope that somehow some restitution to dealing with this would be at hand. And instead, both sides can't even get in the same room with each other anymore, Elijah. And compounding that, they're now having a splintering within their party. The Democratic Party, there used to be something called, I don't know if you remember it, conservative Democrats. It used to be there. I don't think there's one left. In fact, there's not even middle ground anymore. It's really moved hard left. And then within the Republican Party, not as acute as it is in the Democrat, but there are some that feel that they're Republicans and what they call in name only, and they're moving hard right. So I don't know how, if and when the next major crisis comes, and it's going to come, that we have any political will to do anything that can even begin to fix it.
It does seem like a lot of the things cannot be fixed politically, and I think it's a temptation for a lot of us, is even we're looking at this election to, try to pick a savior, right? But at the end of the day, some political figure is not going to solve all of our problems. Do you want to talk to that? I know you obviously share my own religious belief as well, that, at the end of the day, no one political figure can actually be a savior for us. We do have to find that on a spiritual level.
So as a young man, young enough to be my own son, this country, like it or not, managed to do better the first couple hundred years because it chose to incorporate what is commonly known as a Judeo-Christian way, both in every aspect, in law, in business, in school, in personal life. And I don't think it's a coincidence that as we got rid of that and moved completely away from that, things have gotten a lot worse and not better. But the difficulty and the challenges for people like you and I who have a deep faith, and it doesn't matter whether it's a deep Christian faith, a deep Jewish faith, a deep Hindu faith, but have faith in a real maker and the moral obligations that come with practicing that faith, that secularism has become more involved in everyday life. And with that, opens the door for some of the worst secular thoughts ever been proven in the world, and that's communism and socialism. And that's the biggest fear, if you want to know, of the election, that if somehow Trump doesn't win and Harris and whoever's really running behind the scenes, the Wizard of Oz, who's ever back there, will move us more closer to socialism and a form of communism. It is not outrageous, as some would say, the concerns about that. We are seeing many of the signs and many of the acceptance of that type of lifestyle, and it's never worked. People can say whatever they want about capitalism. There's a lot of bad things about it. But the only thing that shows in history, and Milton Friedman was famous for saying it, as you and I speak today, Phil Donahue passed away. One of his greatest interviews was of Milton Friedman when he shared and said, you can say everything you want, but the only thing in man's entire history that led to where the masses had at least a chance or a real opportunity to bring themselves up from the deepness of poor, et cetera, is through a capitalist society. It's never happened in any other. And now we have, as you and I speak, clear anti-capitalism taking place in the streets of Chicago and being supported by the mainstream media as if that's something worth watching or hearing, which history says you need to avoid like the plague.
I think those are all really good points there. So how do people move forward then in that regard if we can't necessarily look to the political arena to solve these issues?
Well, I think we have to start at home, Elijah. I think it starts right in our immediate family and close friends. I think it says in scripture, you'd be in the world, but not of the world. So God knew we had to be around things like this. It wasn't going to create, he did the Garden of Eden once, and of course the woman cost us, but that's another story for another day. But the bottom line is we need to start at home. And one of the things that I believe for almost half of my 40-year career, I've been on this less is more bandwagon, teaching people to have less debt or no debt. There's not a lot of advantage to debt. There's a lot of disadvantage to debt. I'm a great believer that whether you want to look at the Holy Bible as just a reference book of history that may or may not occurred, or it's the Word of God or somewhere in between, who's ever responsible for that book really hit home runs. If you look at what it says to do and don't do, they're absolutely correct. And one of the biggest things that are negative economically from that book is debt. There's not a positive verse about it. There's a lot of negative verses of what happens if you get involved in it. But I also think we have to have an attitude that probably our grandparents had, and maybe your great-grandparents, and that would be less is more. Families didn't have all the stuff that we had. They had smaller dwellings. They didn't have TVs and cell phones and smartphones in every hand. Everybody didn't have a car. Multiple families lived in a dwelling, and yet every mental study says we're more of a mess now than any other previous generation. So George Carlin was right in one thing. He wasn't a religious man, but he did say we have too much stuff. And that's part of it. I've always said that public storage, while they do nothing wrong as a business, they are the poster child for what's wrong with this country, because 50 or 100 years ago, there was no need for public storage, even though we had smaller dwellings and less stuff. So I think it has to start at home. It has to start with us individually, and it has to start with some sort of moral compass. I think without a moral compass, whether it's driven through religion or just common feelings and common sense, we leave ourselves open for all sorts of turmoil. And of course, if you're believers as you and I, and maybe some others that are listening, we believe and recognize that there's somebody mortally trying to destroy our eternal life. And we seem to have forgotten that person in life now. He's been reduced to this little red guy on Halloween that has a pitchfork and all, but he's so much worse than that. And that comes down to what you want to make your beliefs in. And it's tough now. It's not yet to the point where it's difficult for me and you to leave our homes, but it is getting to the point where openly speaking about that can become more challenging than it would have been for our parents or grandparents. And it's not going in the right direction.
I think it does start at home, as you mentioned, and that's really what we're all about, is being more aware of our current financial situation, economic situation, political situation, geopolitical situation, and then being prepared for that. So I think that's all very good. Peter Grandich, I know that people can find you online, Peter Grandich and Company, petergrandich.com. Can you tell us a bit about that and what they'll find there?
Well, I spend a good part of my communicating days in this latter stage of my career on X/Twitter. There is a blog at petergrandich.com. There is a YouTube channel where I put great interviews like you always have with me on there. And I'm glad that one of the things I always say, Elijah, these last few minutes, as much as I enjoyed talking about the markets and all, I feel the real value to be around and hopefully share with somebody is what we discussed in that latter stage, because there are a lot of people that are more knowledgeable clearly than me about finance. I never have felt I was anywhere in the top, but I have gone through things in life to share that when I bring these things out and discuss, that someone who may not be yet to my age or gone to that level hopefully will learn from, unfortunately, the mistakes and poor choices that I made. And one of the ways I always encourage them to do that is to read my book, because I openly share about everything that I possibly could have done wrong in 68 years. And that's on the website. I never get to talk about it, but it is a book of do's and don'ts, and I would encourage people to read it.
Fantastic. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. You have a great weekend. God bless.
And we'll see you at 3,000 gold.
This is Kaiser Johnson, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for August 19th through August 26th, 2024, while supplies last. First, we feature the famous 1-ounce gold Krugerrand at just $60 over spot. Next, we have the favorite bullion coin of Europe, backdated silver Philharmonics at just $3.10 over spot. And finally, we have 1-ounce platinum Canadian maples at only $80 over spot, one of the lowest premiums on platinum we've seen in a long time. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.